Whether you are brand new to Warhammer 40k or have been a veteran for many years, you will have definitely seen the Blood Ravens and the Dawn of War game series. After 8 years of waiting, we finally have a new Dawn of War. It is time for number 4, and oh boy, has it been worth the wait. Today's video has been sponsored by King Art Games, the developers of Dawn of War 4, which not only gave me the amazing opportunity to try out the new game, but also allowed me to interview the developers to ask the questions that really matter. In today's video, we are going to cover my first impressions of a multi-hour hands-on experience of Dawn of War 4. Look at the interview I had with the developers and all the crazy details they shared with us, compare it to older games and other more modern RTS games, and end off with my hopes and wishes for how the story of Dawn of War 4 could unfold, and what teasers we have already gotten. Alright, let's have a look at Dawn of War 4. I need to preface this before I start talking about my direct experiences with the game. I was given a chance to play the pre-alpha version, meaning that not everything was 100% finished and still subject to change, but it definitely gave a really good look at what their vision for the game actually is. So when I first opened up the game, the main thing that stuck out to me was that Dawn of War 4 looks like a modern interpretation of Dawn of War 1. You know, building bases, getting power and requisition points, upgrading your defenses, and even being able to place turrets to defend your backlines, like the Tarantula turret and Hammerfall bunker. Surprisingly, the game is not only focused on base building, but also on in-depth upgrade systems for your individual units, like giving your intercessors jump packs and the sergeant a thunderhammer, or changing your repulsor heavy onslaught Gatling cannon to a less cannon instead to deal with heavy armor, if you don't got the points for a repulsor executioner. The game also allows your units to pop abilities and throw grenades, sniper shots, or hell, even plasma overcharges like they did in Dawn of War 2. I'm also happy to say, for those who have dearly missed this feature, taking cover is back. And it actually works wonders with their new maps. There are little walls, pieces of scrap to hide behind, and even prefabbed Imperial bunkers your units can hide in now while laying down fire into the incoming enemy hordes. Besides the familiar feel, the game is very different in a lot of other regards, mainly quality of life updates, but keeping that real Dawn of War feel. One of my favorite features is the insane animations of units fighting. The sync kills are absolutely spectacular. Watching a marine slide past a mega knob only to uppercut his head off elevates the way the game feels. In a lot of ways, it feels lore accurate. Alright, let's take a look at the gameplay loop. What does the game actually play like? What can you expect? This was from an exemplary mission, and every single one of those will be different. But it gives us a good idea of how the gameplay loop of the game actually works. Your guys arrive to help a little Imperial Guard force. They have set up a small base of operation, but require your help in destroying the enemy orc base. The first thing you do is to start construction on some of your base recruiting buildings. Then, as they are building, we send out the boys to go capture power and requisition points, while fighting off skirmishing orcs and obliterating enemy defenses. As you capture your points, you are given the option to upgrade them, which raises the amount of resources they produce. In the meantime, you will be upgrading your base, adding defenses, upgrading your recruitment buildings, while sending your forces to deal with problems, until you can unlock more powerful units. Then the mission really starts. The game likes to throw curveballs at you, forcing you to play out of your comfort zone. And in my case, meaning I had to lock in for a moment to keep control of the situation. Little side note here, the general way you can select your army is now very familiar to how Total Warhammer does it, but also has a nice little map in the bottom of the left corner that shows you where your camera is looking, and is fully interactable to just teleport your camera across the map, saving me a lot of time when I got used to the layout. While taking your points, upping your resources, building your army and preparing your defenses, it is now time to think about upgrading your fighting units. Do you give the Terminators a heavy flamer for hordes, or an assault cannon for some extra range and shooting punch? Maybe you want your Redemptor Dreadnought with a flamer, but maybe the plasma cannon is a better choice if you are dealing with a lot of heavy armored opponents. On top of all of this, you also get access to command points that allow you to call in things like orbital strikes, cluster bombs, and to redeploy your units, giving you some tactical breathing room when you kinda screw up in a push. But you don't get too many of these points throughout the match, so don't be spamming these abilities the moment you get them. It's definitely not a hero hammer game, meaning your commander can't just go solo the enemy force. You need to balance your army, defenses and resources as best you can. As simply put, instead of a hard model cap, which does exist but is really high, there is upkeep, meaning the more units you put on the field, the less resources you are going to receive. A nice little feature I noticed was the option to auto-reinforce units. Instead of manually clicking on every unit to bring them back up to snuff, you can now have the system do it for you instead. A little quality of life improvement that I didn't even know I needed that badly. Before we get into the interview, I first want to share some fun notes that really blew me away about this experience. There are a lot, and I mean a lot of sync kill animations. With a couple of hours of playing, I kept seeing more and more new animations, and every single one of them is as badass as the other. Number 2. Destruction of the map remains, with a certain limit. When you are fighting and pools of blood form on the map due to enemies, and your own troops, blowing up or getting cut down, the blood, the body parts, stay on the ground, giving a real grim look when you find out what happened to that poor guard unit that advanced a little too far. It is absolutely great and very grim dark. Number 3. Every faction plays very differently. Due to the Marines having very few units on the actual field, you know, elite faction and all that, your turrets actually have some punch to them, unlike the orcs, who will overpower their enemies with large hordes, but their buildings are mediocre at best. Number 4. Units feel lore accurate. When you put a Terminator unit against a unit of Orc Boys, you will just see the greenskins start flying. Their masks and animations are very well done, and feels like the unit is supposed to feel. It is clear that devs worked with Games Workshop to get every unit feeling as accurate as possible. But time for the interview. Let's take a look at what the developers can tell us about Dawn of War 4. I got to have this interview with Jan Thijssen, owner of King Art Games, and Elliot Verbiest, senior game designer for this new game. What happened to Cyrus and the other Bloodraven characters from earlier games? Will we learn what happened to all of the Dawn of War 2 main characters? And I know we have seen Cyrus maybe a little bit already. Do we get to see other ones?
Yeah, maybe not all of them, but at least some of them. So basically the story is that we are about 200 years after the events of the Dark Crusade. We are back at Kronos, which is now basically after the Great Rift opened on the wrong side, you know, and this is also true for most of the Blood Ravens chapter, and so they lost contact to everybody else, and they basically try to go to Kronos, maybe find some other Space Marines there, find maybe new recruits, you know, that is the plan. Obviously it's 40k, so everything goes terribly wrong, but you know, we have not only Cyrus but also Jonah, so these are like our two main protagonists for the Space Marine campaign, and we also have Gorgots back, so yes. Gorgots is also the third recurring character from earlier Dawn of War games. So we are not, you know, it's not clear what happens to happen to everybody else, but you know, you can at least learn what happened to Cyrus and to Jonah.
Awesome. Yeah, actually, talking about Gorgots, is he starting from scratch again, or is this like a brand new WoW after Dawn of War 4, or has he just been continuing? Because did he win at the end of Dawn of War 3?
Well, basically, without spoiling too much, at the so we have the 4 different campaigns, you know, one campaign for each of the factions, and each of the campaigns starts with a big CGI, and the first CGI, the first campaign is the Orcs campaign, and basically what we see is how Gorgots and also the Space Marines arrive at Kronos, and you know, it's not a peaceful arrival, and basically, yeah, he kind of has to start fresh.
Awesome. Now we've seen some of the basic factions, the first 4 factions that are going to be released, the Space Marines, the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Necrons, and the Orcs. Can you tell us anything about planned factions for the future? Will this be like Dawn of War 1 when we saw them added through DLCs, or how will this be done?
Yeah. There are no plans at the moment, or we are focusing on, you know, getting the main game out there as good as we can, because I mean, we have, you know, 4 full factions in there, and there's also for the tutorial a lot of guards units in there as well. So I think we have something like 110 or more than that units and buildings in the game, which, is already a lot. And that is what we're focusing on at the moment, to get all of that stuff not only in there, but also make sure that it feels right? Because this is one of the big things that is important for us. Basically, we want to make sure that all the factions are very distinct and all the units are very distinct. And it's not like, when you play orcs, it's not like, this is basically the same as the Space Marine units, just, looking different. But it's really, okay, orcs fundamentally play different than Space Marines, for example. And, we don't even want to explain this to the player. I think ideally it's more like automatically almost you place orcs a certain way, right? Because units are cheap and buildings are cheap and you build them quickly, and it's not a big deal if you lose one, right? So it's and you need to be very aggressive for certain reasons, right? And so it's very natural to just spread out all over the map, very quickly, and have like this big sprawling base, with a lot of maybe not so great buildings in there. While when you play the Space Marines, it's all about keeping them alive, leveling them up, giving them equipment and specializations and so on. And, so that they play very different. Yeah. And, if you do that for, 4 factions and, 100 units, you'll have your work cut out for you,
Absolutely. Yeah, actually, I want to go into that a little bit. Every faction's playstyle seems a lot more focused now on their actual lore and the way they are represented in the stories. How did you guys get to this decision, and what is the general process you guys go on about when making the mechanics for every main faction?
Sure, yeah. I think I can take that one if you want. So we worked very closely with Games Workshop to get the feel of the factions and the units that they have right. That was one of the core things that we set out to do with Dawn of War, is get that feeling of that grim, dark world right, essentially. Yeah. One of the goals, like we said in the preview, was that we wanted to make the factions as distinct as possible. And of course, that doesn't mean, of course, that we can take things like the tabletop rules verbatim and put them in the game. That's obviously not something that would work one-to-one translation-wise. Really, no. So what our process there was to look at what we considered the essence of every faction and use that as our guiding star to create the core mechanics that the factions revolve around, and then use that as a base to move forward onto, okay, so for the unit within this particular faction, what makes them special? What makes them awesome to players? What resonates with them? And how does that reflect back again on the base level of how does this faction overall work? So that's kind of very broadly how we approached every faction, and then onto that every other unit and mechanic that we had there.
Very cool. Yeah, I noticed that while playing a bit of the preview, it was the way the orcs played against the Space Marines, the way it felt, absolutely amazing.
Cool. Good.
I have one more joke question, because I've had, over the last years, so many comments about this specific thing, and I think you guys gotta know where this is going. I have to ask, will there be front-flipping Terminators in this game, or have we contained those back down in Dawn of War 3?
What are you saying? This is a problem? This is an issue?
I personally liked it, but I think I was one of the few.
No, I mean, I think in general, what we set out is, we looked at all the previous Dawn of War games, of course, because if you want to do Dawn of War 4, the first question is, okay, what is a Dawn of War game, right? And if you take the first one and the second one, both great games, no questions, but very different, and so there is not really like a Dawn of War formula, right? And so we said basically, okay, if we felt strongly that in the end, we want to go back to more like the traditional Dawn of War 1 style, right? So we want to have base building, and we want research, and we want to have economy and all of that, and big battles. And so that was like early on a decision we made. And then we said, okay, what else is important for us? And one of the things that was very important for us is that the game had to look and feel right? Yeah. So it has to be 40K and grimdark and so on. And part of that obviously is, okay, let's make sure that we're as close as possible to the lore, and let's be authentic, and obviously front flipping Terminators, it's not part of the law, so it's not something we would ever suggest to do. But also, by the way, something that Games Workshop wouldn't do anymore today, right? They are much more involved by now, and they make sure that the game fits into, their overall narrative and their overall design for the world, so to speak. And, so I think everybody agrees that the closer you are to the source material, the better it is in the end for the games.
Yeah, and I also think that also goes a little bit further than just, things like animations of what can the units possibly do, but also looking into how do game mechanics function, how does the gameplay work. That's something that we collaborated very closely with Games Workshop as well on, like, okay, we think that this particular mechanic for this faction would be something that could work. Would that work for you guys? And they come back with, well, actually, we have a couple thoughts on this. And sometimes that leads to things where it's like, okay, this way we can bring things as close as possible. And sometimes that leads to fun surprises where, oh, actually, we hadn't really considered that. That's really, really cool. So yeah, it's been a good collaboration so far. So we're looking forward to show more in the future.
And I think it's also it's interesting because there are some things in the lore that just sound great on paper, right? But then if you want to actually implement it in a game, it's really hard, for example, to make fair or to make balance or whatever, I mean, think about Necrons and whatever resurrection orbs. Sure, if you play the Necrons, it's awesome to get, your army back after you lost or almost lost and, all your units are back. But now imagine playing against that, right? And then all of a sudden it's not super fun anymore if, the enemy comes back all the time. And, in a situation like that, we basically said, okay, Necrons are about regeneration and coming back and so on. But how can we implement that into the game without feeling unfair or just, like a gotcha moment or something like that. And, that is basically the idea what Elliot said earlier, basically, let's try to find the essence and let's try to find what really, makes, for example, Dawn of War 1, but also what makes the Necrons. And then let's figure out how this actually works for our game, right? It's not about just copying, a feature or copying like something that the Necrons can do on the tabletop because it's just fundamentally different. Right?
I want to just thank Jan and Eliot again for the amazing interview. They were absolutely wonderful to talk with and had that real OG Warhammer nerd vibe to them, approved by the Dutch. So why should you play this game? Are you kidding me? It's a new good Dawn of War. The game releases with 4 main factions: the Orcs, Space Marines, Necrons and Adeptus Mechanicus. And every single one of those is getting its own narrative campaign to play. And as is tradition with any good Dawn of War, even has the options for an army painter, so you can customize them to your liking. The homebrew community is so back. Like I said before, the game itself feels very nostalgic when looking back at Dawn of War 1 and some of Dawn of War 2, but in reality it is a full refresh, rebuild, rethink, and new game of the classical recipe. I have been scrolling around a lot of comment sections where people ask for a new Dawn of War, and nearly every single request has been answered with this game. But as a lore YouTuber, who would I be if not immediately start begging for how the story of Dawn of War continues? I love me some crispy, well-cooked new lore, and I'm happy to say we've already got some teasers, because the Black Library writer John French is the one helping with writing the campaigns for this game. However, before I share more, let's do a quick recap on what happened in the older Dawn of War games, starting with Dawn of War 1. The story of Dawn of War 1 follows Gabriel Angelos, the captain of the Bloodraven's 3rd Company, as he tries to save the world of Tartarus from the orcs under warboss Orcamungus. While Angelos expects a tough fight, he was surprised to find the Eldar, Inquisition and Alpha Legion all undertaking their own plots on the planet of Tartarus. With an incoming warp storm, Tartarus would be lost, but Gabriel Angelos went against the order of Inquisitor Todd, who ordered the Bloodravens to leave immediately. Although Todd ended up helping the Bloodravens and even gifting them the relic Demon Hammer Godsplitter, he remained secretive and did not want to share the demonic presence hidden on Tartarus. Tragedy would strike for Angelos, as while he managed to beat the orcs in short order, and even the Alpha Legion in the long run with the Eldar, his close friend and librarian Isidore fell to Chaos corruption. Dawn of War 1 ends with the death of Isidore, the sorcerer Sindri, and the Eldar trying to convince Angelos to not destroy a demonic artifact named the Maledictum, which was the origin of demonic corruption on Tartarus. With his newly acquired relic in hand, Angelos destroyed the Maledictum, but this in turn unleashed a mighty demon of Khorne, who continued to plague the Bloodravens in the years to come. Now, Dawn of War 1 had 3 expansions, and while all of them have campaigns with multiple endings, I have to speedrun them for the sake of time. So starting with Winter Assault, the first expansion. Winter Assault introduces the Imperial Guard as a new playable faction and begins with the story of General Stern, my beloved, the commander of the 412th Cadian Regiment, and his mission on Lorn 5. On Lorn 5, the Imperial Guard was sent in to retrieve a fallen Imperator Titan named Dominatus. On the world itself, the orcs under Warboss Gorguts, remember his name, and World Eaters were fighting. When the Eldars show up and they prepare to fight the Necrons, Winter Assault becomes a battle of the Eldar and Cadians, teaming up against the Orcs and World Eaters. Sadly, General Stern is betrayed by the Eldar Farseer Taldir, and the World Eater commander Krull is killed as well. The story of Winter Assault ends on our next expansion, Dark Crusade, which continues the stories of both Taldir and Gorguts on the planet of Cronus. Under Captain Davian Tull, he commanded 3 companies to great success on Cronus. Sergeant Adeptus and Tarkus, whom we will talk about in a minute, also served with distinction under Tull. The same, however, cannot be said for Sergeant Cyrus, who served under Idric Boreal under the Karauva campaign from the Soulstorm game, our 3rd and final expansion of Dawn of War 1. Soulstorm is a dark part of the Bloodraven's history, as the Orc Warboss Gorguts makes his 2nd return and first victory. Now that I have mentioned them, let's continue right into Dawn of War 2. The story of Dawn of War 2 builds on all previous Bloodraven characters and introduced a whole host of new ones. Davian Tull makes a return, as does Gabriel Angelos. Sadly, it is also confirmed that Idric Boreal did not survive the Karauva campaign, no matter how much he used Steel Rain. Dawn of War 2 tells the story of a character you, the player, get to name, but is otherwise known as the Force Commander. He was also given a canonical name in a Bloodraven novel released later, and is called Aramus. Aramus is on the primary recruitment world of the Bloodravens in the subsector Aurelia. These worlds are being attacked by the Orcs, and the defenders are few. Of the actual fully fledged Space Marines present, there is Aramus, who holds the rank of Sergeant, but due to his recent feats and heroics is being considered for promotion to the rank of Captain. With him are Sergeant Tarkus, leading a tactical squad, Sergeant Avitus and his Devastators, Sergeant Thaddeus at the head of an assault squad, and finally Scout Sergeant Cyrus. Other than our brave heroes, numerous Bloodraven's neophytes are being led by Davian Tull, our brave commander from the Dark Crusade. Alongside some support staff, you are utterly alone against the Orc onslaught, later finding out that the Eldar diverted the Orcs in hopes of defeating a tendril of High Fleet Leviathan. Gabriel Angelos, alongside more recruitments from the chapter, make their way to relieve Aramus and his ragtag band of battle brothers, but before they could arrive, Davian Tull was mortally wounded and interred within a dreadnought. Dawn of War 2 has 2 expansions, starting with Chaos Rising. Chaos Rising takes place 1 year after the end of the first game. With reinforcements having arrived, all-out war has begun against the Tyranids, but that makes for a boring story to continue. So the story of Chaos Rising, of course, involves a lot of chaos. The world Aurelia, which was the true homeworld of the chapter, finally reappeared after it disappeared into the warp for 1,000 years. Our Force Commander Aramus is sent to investigate the homeworld. Here he finds traitor guardsmen, and, later on, even Black Legionaries. In this game we are also joined by Librarian Jonah, fending off the Eldar once again. During Chaos Rising, your forces are spread, cleaning up the Orcs, Eldar and Tyranids, as well as reclaiming Aurelia. Yet during this game, it is also revealed there is a traitor amongst the Bloodravens. While, like the other game, the ending and reveal of the traitor is different from game to game, we do have a canonical ending. Sadly, our Devastator Sergeant, Avitus, betrayed the chapter, but he's far from the only traitor. The corruption runs deep in the chapter, as even the Bloodraven's chapter master is a heretic. This results in a chapter-wide civil war, and Aramus being forced to go on a permanent crusade. Dawn of War 2 Retribution takes place 10 years later, and well, the Aurelia subsector is still in turmoil. So, First Captain Apollo Diomedes, Sergeant Cyrus, Tech Marine Martellus, who joined us in Dawn of War 2, and Sergeant Tarkus, now dubbed the Ancient after taking an oath of silence, are led by Gabriel Angelos to save the chapter. After some back and forths, Orcs, Inquisitors and Eldar all getting involved, the final Dawn of War expansion ends with the near death of Gabriel Angelos as he fought the demonic Azaria Kiras, who was corrupted by Khorne, which is certainly a choice for a librarian. He became a hero for the chapter, and Angelos is chosen to become the new chapter master and seeks to redeem the chapter. Now there's Dawn of War 3, and I honestly wish I could just tell you more about the story. Sadly, backflipping Terminators, superhero landing knights, and Gorguts, my beloved, returning distracted me. But all you need to know from Dawn of War 3 is that Gabriel Angelos still leads the chapter, Diomedes has become a chaplain, Gorguts ends up stealing the Spear of Cain and becomes even more powerful, and indeed canonically won the game. Now for Dawn of War 4. We know 2 of the main Bloodraven characters are returning to lead their new Primaris brothers into battle, that being Cyrus, the old scout sergeant, and Jonah the librarian. Of course, as this game will have all 4 main factions with their own campaigns, there's going to be a lot of lore, and dozens of hours of narrative, cinematics, and animations. Personally, the main thing I am excited for is seeing all the cool new animations and sync kills. I've spent hours just watching units go at each other, and I'm super excited to see how the story itself will develop, what is going to happen to our Bloodravens and the returned Gorguts, and if we see any more returning heroes or villains from earlier games. Once again, thank you to King Art Games for sponsoring this video and giving me this amazing opportunity to discover what Dawn of War 4 is going to bring. Use the link down in the description and comment section below to put Dawn of War 4 on your wishlist if this video convinced you to go get it, because this game is absolutely awesome. Thank you for watching, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. Bye bye.